Hello, glad to see you on my channel. I really value it. And today I want to share with you a wonderful story. It's a dramatic story that will come as a total shock to everybody. It is a really amazing story. So enjoy watching it. The time was early, only 6 in the morning, but in the village at this time the work is already in full swing. Christy soaked bread crusts in boiling water for the pigs, boiled Herculean porridge with chicken necks for the dogs, and prepared fresh grass for the chickens. It's the end of June, which means it's time to harvest the first crop of cucumbers and tomatoes from the greenhouses. If everything goes as it should, they will soon have a lot of satisfied customers. Christy picked up the phone and wanted to call her husband, Vasily, to wish him a good day. He, the hard worker, left for the field at about 5 in the morning, and she didn't even have time to kiss him goodbye. And what to do? The crops wouldn't work themselves. The two of them kept a solid farm, but it was a pity that God was not in a hurry to send them many children to help them. So far, he had given only one helper, but what a helper! It was only when Christy's fingers found the right contact that she heard. "No," the young woman whispered fearfully. "It can't be. It simply could not be." She would have liked to be wrong. She would have liked to pretend that nothing was happening, but the roar of the German engine was getting closer. She would not have mistaken it for anything else. A sound so deep, so rolling, and yet so nasty at the same time. A sound she had known for 6 years. The woman immediately rushed to the barn to fetch a ladder, put it against the high gate, and nimbly climbed it. It's all true. Another treacherous invasion was in preparation, which would bring her nothing but disappointment. The return journey was difficult, for she was dizzy with excitement. Without remembering herself, the young woman rushed into the children's room. "Alarm!" Christy shouted. "Get up, Max! We must go to the forest, to the forest." "Take the cow, Mom," frightened asked the boy in his sleep. "No time, son, no time. Get dressed and run. Follow me," said the mother. "We will retreat into the forest." She herself rushed to the kitchen to get something to eat. But how much can you gather in those seconds? She grabbed a fresh, fragrant pie, freshly baked in the evening, a piece of salted lard, and a knife. It's all right. It's enough for the first time. And then, as they say, the swan will come. The sound of a rumbling motorcycle came a little closer. It was approaching inexorably, like a rock. "Son, why are you digging?" Christy said impatiently. "Yes, I'm already here, Mommy," Max answered, showing himself in the hay. The son grew up smart and obedient. As soon as his mother said the word forest, he immediately dressed appropriately. High boots, tight pants, a long-sleeved shirt with a long neck, and a hat. Don't look that the 6th year is going, the head works well. And there is no need to persuade to get up in the morning. Himself wakes up, washes himself. He's a miracle, not a son. He must not fall into the hands of the invaders. Must not. At last, Christy exhaled. "Don't ask me anything. Max will run after me." "And breakfast, Mom?" asked the boy, yawning. "I'm hungry, I'm dying." "Be patient. We'll have breakfast in the forest." The woman threw over her shoulder. Running away, she turned off the gas stove and rushed outside, where she took the lids off the troughs. The pigs immediately gorged themselves on their breakfast, slurping with delight. The sight made her want to snack herself. Then Christy took the lard and pie in one hand, Max's hand in the other, and dashed for the back door. The sound of the German engine, meanwhile, was stilled and did not approach. It was hammering somewhere out there in the middle of the village. Could it be that the invaders were having trouble advancing? "Mom, what's going on?" Max asked, looking at Christy's frightened face. "Later, I'll explain later." The woman waved her hand. "You're still too young to understand everything, honey." Christy went out through the secret gate and carefully adjusted the boards that covered it. If you don't know, you won't notice. Their hut was the plot at the very edge of the village, so the murmur of a German engine could be heard long before the invaders reached their position. But if usually she waited for the approach of the rumble as inevitable, today she decided to act. Today the mistress decided to go into the woods, to hide, to wait out the trouble. And as soon as they turned the corner to go around plot, "Where are we going?" Veronica asked, appearing as if from nowhere. "We," Christie asked. "To the woods. To pick berries, mushrooms." "Oh, berries," whispered her mother-in-law. "Ah, mushrooms. That's how you look after my son's household. So he left you in charge of the house? He left you in charge of the house, his son entrusted, and you for mushrooms?" "Well, yes." The young woman faded her eyes. "As if you never go to the forest for mushroom." "You do not talk to me here," grinned mother-in-law. "You are still young to collect mushrooms like me." "Aha," Christie replied defiantly. "And for a motorcycle, I'm also apparently young. Veronica." For several seconds, the old woman and the young woman looked at each other with hateful glances. The air between them was so electrified that lightning could occur at any second. The roar of the engine continued to echo somewhere far away, never approaching the house. Max was the first to come to his senses. "Grandma," he said excitedly. "Grandma is here. Well, we won't go to the forest now, of course." "Oh, my grandson," smiled Veronica, and immediately changed, as if she had put a mask on her face. "Look how they've starved you here. They don't feed you anything, do they? No compote to pour, no porridge to boil? Well, we'll fix that in no time." It was Christie's turn to wrinkle his brow. As all times before, the arrival of the mother-in-law was not announced and took place on the conditions of surprise. It was not easy to understand such secrecy because she lived in the village, only 40 kilometers away from them. But Veronica considered herself a sort of checker. She considered it her duty to arrive unexpectedly, to find as many wrongdoings of the unhappy daughter-in-law as possible. She kept imagining that the young woman had a lover, and as soon as the lawful husband went to the field, he was there. The arguments that everyone in the village was in the palm of her hand were not taken into account. She could drive Tony crazy with her fables. "You can't give him soursop," Christie demanded. "All we did was cure his allergies and take him to doctors in the city. Do you know how many powders he had to take? So no soursop, Kivita and other drinks from packets, okay? So you have time for the city," Veronica muttered unhappily, "but not for the priest and the church. What better cure than sincere prayer? When the priest learns how to cure allergies, I'll go to him right away." The young woman cut her off. Once again, there was a tense silence. The engine continued to rumble somewhere in the distance, but its revolutions began to stall. Max helped the situation again. "Grandma, how long will you stay with us?" he asked. "Will you play with me?" "Oh, grandson." "Well, lead already into the house," demanded the mother-in-law. "And where is it your machine?" surprised Christie. "Stuck in the middle of the village," shrugged Veronica. "It is apparently you wanted to visit me so badly that even jinxed the technique." Before her marriage, Christie thought that all stories about rubbing between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law fictional or black humor. Could two women who love the same person really be feuding? Is it really so difficult to find a common language with a new relative? But already during the wedding it became obvious. Stories not only do not lie, but sometimes understatement. The character of Veronica was not just authoritative, but despotic. In her house, everything was supposed to agree with the mistress. Spiders, the shape and size of the web, nightingales, and the vegetable garden repertoire of marriage songs. Tony, the only son of the bossy woman, suffered most of all from this character. As an 18-year-old boy, he ran away to the army. And when he came back, he described the everyday life of a private. "Well, Mom, the petty officer in the company's demanding hard, but you are not up to you. Not even half." Veronica considered such a characteristic flattering and continued to demand from her son with renewed vigor. But she overdid it. At the age of 22, her Tony decided to get married, and to a bride with a large dowry. In addition to sudden love, young people moved in some kind of calculation. Christicia, such a man like Tony, was vital, hard-working, inebriated, affectionate. She was suddenly orphaned, and the girl was a large house and household, and Tony urgently needed to escape from his own mother, so as not to happen irreparable. At first she could not be pleased with the malleability of her husband and his diligence. But over time, the very pitfalls the reason for his peace of mind. And if Christie's dowry was like in the palm of her hand hut, household and beauty, then part of Vasia's dowry was safely hidden from human eyes. Every time she came to the house of her daughter-in-law and son, Veronica began to put things in order. All tools were used, from persuasion to threats to kill herself if something was wrong. And when her son arrived, the battle over how to raise the boy began immediately. "What do you mean you are not happy to see me?" continued her interrogation mother-in-law as they walked to the house. "What have you stuffed in your purse?" "Let me see." Christie sighed. The new relative reminded her of a witch from children's fairy tales. Only in this way to scare hapless wives, say you will behave badly. Unlike the canonical witch, Veronica did not fly on a broom. She had an ancient motorcycle with a German engine, and she used witchcraft to set it in motion every time she was going somewhere. "I won't give it to you," said the landlady. "My basket is mine and my tear." "Give it to me," demanded the mother-in-law. "You're probably bringing your lover another present." The women began to tear the basket from each other until the handle cracked. A piece of lard flew out and fell on the sand. Christie's mood immediately soured. "Can't we wash it?" "No, not at all. There are all sorts of animals walking around," my mother-in-law commented. "You see what you've done? You shouldn't have gotten into my basket," the young woman said resentfully. "I need to know everything," was the answer. "I have to check everything." "Well, that's my nature." "So what about the bike, Veronica?" Christie asked, ignoring the barbs of her mother-in-law. "Should I call Tony?" "It's all right." The woman waved her hand. The steering wheel stopped obeying, and for some reason the engine won't turn off. "Now the fuel will burn out. He'll calm down. Let it stand there. It's bothering someone, isn't it? Tony's coming tonight. He'll tow it here to the station, dismantle it. Until he fixes it, I'll stay with you. Don't threaten me," thought Christie, but she said nothing. When she entered the house, her mother-in-law immediately rushed to check its sanitary and technical condition. Immediately fell to her knees and looked carefully at the floor and the hay. There was enough sand and dust. Ran her finger along the door trim dust. Ran to the curtains dirt. On the TV set, without which it is impossible to imagine a village hut, a spider has woven a huge web. "And this is the mess in which my favorite grandson and my favorite son live?" asked Veronica, clutching at her heart. "You'll drive my boys to their graves with your mismanagement." "Veronica, for God's sake," Christie blurted out. "Don't you touch God," said her mother-in-law. "How much do you know about him?" Then she rushed into the kitchen with such speed that she could have set several regional sprint records. She carefully inspected the refrigerator, the freezer, barrels of pickles, stocks, pots and pans, and even onion husks. The next room Veronica felt obliged to look in was the bedroom. "You can't go in there," Christie said sternly, standing in front of the door. "So you have secrets," whispered her mother-in-law. "You hide your lover there while my son is working. I knew it. I told him. Think twice before marrying an orphan. Orphans are known to be in love." "What lover?" The landlady was indignant and opened the door wide. "What's that got to do with my being an orphan? Tony and I hadn't made the bed, so I didn't want to show you. Look, envy me." The family bed did indeed bear the marks of a stormy night. She and Tony were tossing and turning, not so much because of love as because of the heat. Neither the open window nor the fan helped. But Veronica's gaze immediately fell on the bedside table, where an unfamiliar object had appeared. She had never seen it before. The woman quickly ran over and took the item in her hands. The gift box had the inscription "Favorite," mother-in-law on it. "Oh, is it for me?" shrieked Veronica, running up to the table. "You're not as bad as I thought. What a surprise. I love getting presents." "No, no," Christy waved her hands. "No, put it back, please." But it was too late. As if in slow motion, she watched her mother-in-law take the box in her hands, open it, take something out of it, unwraps it, and how the expression on her face from joyful became first incomprehensible and then simply angry, because what was in the box made Veronica boil with rage, and Christy blushed with shame. Driving around the huge field, Tony couldn't get excited about the new tractor. How new? Of course, the machine had plowed not 100 kilometers while it fell into his caring hands. He had to rebuild the suspension, service the engine, buy new attachments. Then, of course, he adjusted the steering, repainted, put a modern ignition system so that his tractor started easily and quickly. But now, after all that work, he felt like a true king of the fields. Nothing could distract him from his ideal except a phone call. During the conversation, it was possible not even to muffle the engine. The interlocutor could be heard well. "Tony," Christy cried into the phone. "Tony, come home quickly, we have an accident." "Well, my darling," he replied, "I've only done one lap. I've got 2 more hours of work to do before the sun gets high. Otherwise, we'll be left without fodder, my love." "Come back, my love," my wife continued. "Please, Tony, I'm waiting." The farmer wanted to ask what had happened, but the answer didn't take long. In the background, he heard the voice from which he first ran away to the army, and then to a foreign village 40 kilometers away. Of course, he liked life with Christy much better than building on the formation. But if it were not for his overbearing mother, he probably would still not be in a hurry to get married, and from the military commissar would run a year or 2. Sighing, Tony poked his head out of the tractor cab and looked around. There was a lot of work to do, and he wanted to get it done before the heat wave so he could go to the wholesale store to pick up some paper boxes. "Soon, very soon, we'll go tomatoes and cucumbers, only have time to remove. Buyers, wholesale, and retail will be coming to their house." "What do you mean I have to drop everything and go to calm down my mother and wife?" Grown women, Tony thought. Well, they had a little fight, so who doesn't? By the time I get there, they'll be reconciled, and nothing to interfere with them because I always get into their squabbles. I end up being the one to blame. As soon as Tony started the engine with the firm intention of working the field to the end, the call came again. This time, it was his mother. "Yes, I'm listening," he said, so that it was clear at once. There was no time for rocking at all. "So, that's how you meet me here," came a disgruntled voice. "This is how you live here. If you don't apologize right now, I'm packing my things and I won't be here anymore." If only it were that easy, thought Tony. But he didn't say anything. "What's wrong, Mummy?" the tractor driver asked. "You know it's summertime. I've got a lot to do. But why am I telling you this? You've lived in the village all your life. You've got a lot on your plate," Veronica asked. "Well, come and see what your wife does here. How she amuses herself and pleases herself while you're away. I've told you 100 times. You should watch your wife like a dog. If she runs off to the neighbor's yard, you'll be in trouble." "What do you mean? What does she do?" Tony was surprised. "Well, guess," Veronica teased him. "No, you answer it." The man got angry. Off the phone, the obnoxious mother-in-law replied and hung up. Tony snorted. He dialed his mother, but she didn't answer. Then to his wife, but her phone was off. Jealousy covered the tractor driver's eyes. His mother had told him that Christy didn't love him, and that she couldn't have children except one. So it wasn't an accident either. And she's got a lover. That's it. You live and learn. Tony's love experience was a little short. He met Christy right after the army, and soon they were married. There was only one woman he'd known before he met his soulmate. What was her experience, he wondered. They never discussed it. Could she really do it? Thought the tractor driver. Oh, all women are the same. Driving through the village, he was surprised to see his mother's ancient motorcycle right in the middle of the street. It was a machine he wouldn't mistake for anything else. He saw that the bodywork was all rusty, and he felt a little ashamed. After all, his mom had asked him a long time ago to go over and treat the metal. She must have left her bike out in the distance on purpose to sneak up on him in silence, Tony thought. The closer they got to home, the more the man boiled. How will they divide the child? And the joint property? After all, you can consider on the ready. Maid, his wife is an orphan, his father. In-law and mother-in-law died foolishly, leaving Christy all alone. Kick him out, and Tony would be left with a naked torso. Pushing those thoughts away, the man left the tractor outside the gate and rushed into the house. Everything was wide open. As he ran into the hay, he saw his wife crying. Nearby, on a simple rustic chair, lay a man's underpants. Bright red ones he'd never wear in his life. "Where is he?" shouted Tony, appearing on the doorstep. "Where is he? Tell me." "There," Christy answered and waved a hand toward the bedroom. The husband grabbed this piece of clothing, not remembering himself from rage, rushed out the door. And then there was a picture of oil. "Mom?" Tony asked. "Where's the lover?" "That you know. Cheaters." "Where is the lover?" replied the old woman, and began to pretend to sob. "And how do you live here, that the last grandmother of your Max is ready to bring to the coffin?" The man took a closer look, and the reason why his mother had lost her temper became clear to him. And Tony felt a little ashamed again. It was their little innocent prank. What fun could there be in the country? There's no time to relax in the summer. There's so much to do. One of the guests gave Max a game. It is necessary to load guns and shoot at targets, to fulfill tasks. But one of the heroines on the target turned out to be his mother-in-law. To make the resemblance maximal, Christy armed herself with a brush, paints and painted her. Now she and her husband have a ritual in the evenings to shoot the mother-in-law. They even invented a rule. One says something offensive thing in someone else's voice, and the other pulls the trigger. Yes, if she knew that Veronica was coming to visit, she would have hidden this innocent thing. "So there is no lover?" asked the husband, coming out into the hay to his wife. He was scratching the back of his head thoughtfully. "What?" Christy was indignant. "Just do not start, I beg you. Your mother has already said so much to me that I just all boiling. If there is no lover, then what is this?" Tony asked, pointing at the man's underwear. "These are for you." "Your mom brought them," replied the wife, shrugging her shoulders. "Wear them as long as you like." Tony scrutinized the underwear. Well, now he'd have to wear such a disgrace. The underpants are not only all red, but also tight. You can't wear them to the bathhouse with them in. They'll laugh, and in front of his wife he would hardly be able to walk in such a shame. Tony sighed and went back into the bedroom to apologize to his mother. But here, "Mom, why did you move our bed?" he asked with surprise. Together with his wife, her house and household, he got a strange sleeping place. According to legend, such a bed was brought from Czechoslovakia by his mother-in-law, whom he had only seen in a photograph. 2 parts could be joined into one, which they did on the first night of their acquaintance. And if you wanted, it could be divided into 2 beds. "You shouldn't sleep in the same bed while I'm here," Veronica explained. "You'll embarrass yourselves and embarrass me." "Mother, what are you doing?" Tony said in an incomprehensible voice. "We've been married for years, Mother." "What are you doing?" shouted the woman. "This is it. Ordered a picture with my face to shoot. That's why my whole body and face aches in the evenings. That's what relatives of enemies are like." "You don't understand anything," Tony said. "Nobody ordered you. No one is shooting. Here's a cross for you. It's a joke, you know. You don't know how to apologize. So go get my motorcycle," my mother demanded. "See what's wrong with it. I was driving, and the steering wheel failed, and the gas was gone, although the engine kept on revving. After standing in the doorway for a few seconds, the man turned and walked away. One part of his mind wanted to apologize to his mother, and the other wanted to kick her out and forbid her to come to their house forever. You'd have to make it look like Christy had a lover. He almost went crazy with jealousy and already had a divorce in his head. Good thing he didn't have time to say anything nasty to his wife. The mother-in-law slowly came out of the bedroom and looked at her daughter-in-law carefully, and what only her favorite son found in her. The figure must have once been beautiful, but when was that? Now, as a woman's taste, her ass was too much rounded, with such a rounded ass that you can't run around the house with it. Blush on her face, eyebrows tinted. Who does she work so hard for when her husband spends so much time in the field? Well, now we'll deal with you, Veronica said, pressing her lips together. But the daughter-in-law quickly thought of a way out of the situation. I'm going to help my husband to roll the motorcycle, and you look after Max. Found the mistress and left the house. She shouted mother-in-law, but the shot was blank because the door had already closed. Walking through her native village, it seemed to Christy that all the villagers were laughing behind her back. Here lived hard, working and enthusiastic people. All the houses were beautiful, renovated, and well. The gardens are even weeded. The fences are neat, strong, and even. The whole street came out to see Tony cleaning up his mother's faulty motorcycle. At first, rumbling like an ancient tractor, swore Lucas, in front of whose house and stuck this machine. Smoked like a battleship, and then it got stuck. It's been standing there for 2 hours without anyone caring. Don't swear, Father, we'll clean it up, Tony said cheerfully, and the villager calmed down a bit. Look, Lucas shouted with renewed vigor when he saw Christy, and threw the landlady out of the house. That's a disaster. That's a disaster. Intercepting Tony's angry look, the old man turned around and went to his hut. People here did not like to tell others how to live and what to do, and Lucas was considered a cowardly man, but there was some truth in what he said. Christy smiled, approached her husband, and asked, "Do you need any help, honey?" "No," Tony exhaled. "It's a lot of work. How did she even use it to get to our village?" "Black magic, no other way," his wife replied, and they both laughed. "Well, magic or not, I'll have to tow it to the yard," the husband waved his hand. "Now, if I tightly sit down and order the parts, then tomorrow everything will be ready. And by evening we'll get her out." "And when will you go for the boxes?" Christy asked. She was the same as his mother-in-law, whom he had never met. She had a perfect grip on things, they said. "There's a little left over from last time." Tony waved his hand. "I went into the greenhouses. Not much to take off there." "They're plastic crates," Christy said, and her husband smiled. After all, he was lucky to have a wife. With such a thrifty and savvy woman, they will definitely build a house for his son. The two of them had a hard time fixing the old motorcycle to the tractor. The front wheel Tony securely attached to the frame, and the rear wheel rode on the ground. Then the two of them climbed into the cab and rode home. Of course, it was only a 10-minute walk, but it was so nice for Christy to spend a little more time with her soulmate. "Listen, Christy," he said, taking her hand. "I'll have her rumbler fixed by morning. She'll sleep over and be on her way in the morning. She's nothing but a nuisance in this house. She made me come all the way from the field." "Don't worry, Tony," his wife said gently. "Don't take it so hard. Of course your mother misses her son. And she's not a bad woman, but she's too fond of order. She was very fond of her husband. And as soon as they came close to each other, her heart was immediately filled with warmth, tenderness, and a feeling of happiness. With this unearthly feeling, they instantly found themselves in their native yard. They unhooked the motorcycle from the tractor and rolled it to the garage, where Tony had a perfect order. The garage was also given to him, along with all the dowry, but the man brought the workplace to perfection. Now there was light everywhere. Neat workbenches and every detail knew its place. The mistress looked at this kingdom of screws and nuts and decided not to disturb her husband. In a minute she was already in the hay. After the time spent with her husband, she felt very good and even wanted to sing. Christy thought that with her mother-in-law just need to talk properly to discuss and explain everything. And she will definitely go along with it because Veronica is a smart, educated woman. There was a suspicious silence in the house, and some strange odor as if someone was diligently scrubbing and mopping the floors. And when Christy entered her favorite bedroom, what she saw literally rendered her speechless. Her parents, who had passed away prematurely, had instilled in the young woman good taste. Her dwelling did not resemble a village house, but rather a cottage or a country house. Both the bathroom and the toilet were in a separate annex. Hot water was also in the kitchen, where her mother had made a very nice set. And Christy herself liked to watch some fashion videos on the internet and make her own jewelry, or buy it. The bedroom was a point of pride. If Christy had money for a designer, she'd never give it to him. So she found beautiful pictures on the internet and reproduced them completely. Her parents had left a bed, which according to legend was a Czechoslovakian bed, and an even, snow-white ceiling which her father had made shortly before his death. Together with her husband, they covered the walls with plasterboard sheets, hiding the electrical wiring, sockets, and switches. They leveled them as much as they could. With her own hands in several layers, Christy lovingly spackled these sheets, then pasted neat wallpaper light pink color, and on these her imagination ran wild. She drew ornaments and flowers, and when her son was 3 years old, they stenciled animals together. Both windows were decorated with massive oak windowsills. Too dear, at least to her heart. Lamps appeared by the bed, which they turned on in the evenings. Gradually, the room filled with beautiful modern furniture. The cherry on the cake was the large television that Tony had hung on the wall, after some simple calculations. How nice it was for them to relax in this cozy nest. "Mom, we are playing builders," Max exclaimed. "Soon we will lay tiles." "That's great, isn't it?" Entering the bedroom, Christy tearfully looked at what was left of her favorite interior. Her mother-in-law had stripped off the last of the wallpaper using an old blunt knife. In a few places, she had overdone it and punched holes in the drawer sheets. Since Veronica was not tall enough, it was difficult for her to reach the ceiling, even with the help of a bench and a chair placed on it. She had to jump up and down, wielding the same knife. The result was scratches and damage to the snow-white ceiling created by her father, which had been so carefully protected from damage during the renovation. While moving her construction, my mother-in-law managed to tear the oak windowsill out of place. She hadn't realized to cover the TV, and now there were white dots on the surface. Veronica had broken one of the lamps near the bed, and so as not to make it conspicuous, she had removed both of them and put them under the bed. Christy felt dizzy, like she was going to faint. I wondered, "Why do you need that pink wallpaper? Why the frills?" said the mother-in-law, still wielding her blunt knife, pale somehow, sluggish. "How did you in such a bedroom?" "Forgive God," Max neighed. "No wonder nothing else works. It's okay, I've already ordered real wallpaper, orange and bright red like the dawn. So you'll always be ready for labor, defense, and conception." Christy stared silently at the stripped walls and the wooden floor stained with glue residue. The old wallpaper must have been unyielding, so Veronica had decided to wet it. She hadn't thought to cover the floor, of course. How long it would take to tidy up the bedroom after such a repair she could only guess. But this is very expensive wallpaper. Christy was indignant. "We ordered them from Italy after the wedding. What is more expensive for you? Contrast me or some Italy," went on the attack mother-in-law. "So no one will be born that from Italy. And it means good, real wallpaper ordered from China." Then I look upstairs and think, what is this such a sycophantic ceiling? There are good human panels. I ordered them too. Tony will install them, we'll put skirting around the perimeter, and it'll be just like a human ceiling. "Paneling," the young woman shrieked. "Never in my life." "Why is that?" The mother-in-law puffed up her cheeks. Do you know how easy it is to clean the panels? Put a damp cloth on the mop, ran a few times as new. Who am I telling this to? Have you ever cleaned your ceiling yourself? The mother-in-law and daughter-in-law stared at each other. Veronica clutched the old blunt knife so tightly in her hand, as if she were going to use it alone to attack a bear. Christy was figuring out how many years in prison you could get for murder by passion, and how to make it look more convincing. In the meantime, Tony, having diagnosed the motorcycle, came to the most disappointing conclusions. It turned out that the ancient motorcycle with a trophy engine is easier to dispose of than to try to return to service. Having written out the spare parts on a piece of newspaper, he moved towards the bedroom. There, in peace and quiet, with his wife's appetizing ass on his knee, to look for cheaper parts on the internet. But as soon as he crossed the threshold of the bedroom, "Holy Mother," whispered Tony, looking at the ruins left of his family nest, and crossed himself. What on earth is going on? "Remont," Veronica said in syllables. "Repair. Something you should have done a long time ago instead of waiting for the old lady to come and make it pretty. Don't you know the customs? If you can't bring a baby into the world for a long time, you need what? Repairs." But Tony seemed to have lost the ability to talk. He walked over to the oak windowsill that he had so lovingly put in its rightful place a few years ago, without a single nail. How had his mother managed to tear it out? Why, it's impossible, thought the man. A man can't tear off such a thing beyond his strength. "I've already ordered wallpaper," Veronica continued to chirp, as if not noticing the state of her son and his wife. "And the panels are gorgeous. Richard should be here tomorrow morning." "Tomorrow morning?" Tony asked angrily. "Where?" Veronica was surprised. "You, it means in the hay. It's chilly there at night, so you're a hardened guy. And Christy is not a proud girl. She can spend a couple of nights in the barn. I've seen it myself. You've got an old bed there for one." Tony froze, trying to find the words. He felt both anger and shame, for it was his mother who had broken into their house and was trying to impose her own rules. And what a hatchet job. The most important thing is that after the wedding, help from her was not asked. She was offended that he proposed to his future wife without her consent. Blessing. Then they, young and inexperienced, had a lot of trouble with the repair. And now then, so after so many years, she is ready to do everything herself, and even without outside help. How long did he go for the bike? About 30 minutes. How did she manage to mess it up so fast? Even in a week you cannot fix. And already need to remove the tomatoes and cucumbers. The customers will be here soon. "Mom, you listen to me," began Tony, carefully choosing words. "Listen to this thing I'm going to tell you." "No, you listen now," Veronica cut him off. "If you can't do anything yourself, you should ask your elders for help." "Your elders? Who's your senior?" I raised you, didn't I? You're a handsome man. The first guy in the village. All the girls are chasing you. Do you think someone helped me?" "No one helped you. I did it all by myself with these two hands. I'll take Max away from you and raise him myself if you're both so helpless." Christy seemed about to explode. Tony had never seen his wife so red and furious in his life. She was probably just now realizing that the wallpaper that had been ripped off the walls was irretrievable. He wanted to reassure his wife and promise her that they would fix everything, restore everything. But the bedroom door opened again and their son came running in. "Mom, Dad, Grandma," Max shouted happily. "We've got company. Richard's here." "He's so quick," smiled her mother-in-law. "I was expecting him when I was waiting for him." But he just came. She took the first towel from the shelf and wiped her hands, all dirty with glue. She cleaned under her fingernails too, just to make herself feel good. Christy turned green with anger. It was a towel she and her mother had embroidered years ago, and since then the item had become something of a talisman for her, especially after her mom's death. "What are you doing?" the woman shouted. but her mother-in-law didn't even notice her exclamation. "There's water in the kitchen. There's water in the bathroom." Veronica went outside and looked unhappily at Richard's transportation. "Yeah, it's small." Her order for wallpaper and panels he was supposed to bring on a truck Gazelle. And here he had come in a passenger car. Couldn't he have at least brought some wallpaper, a few tubes and glue? "We should get started while everyone's here. I better teach Max to work. He's growing up to be a bum," but the look on the messenger's face puzzled her. Richard, the old village comrade, was troubled about something. He was finishing his cigarette and he was trying to get all the smoke out of it, so he might as well have swallowed the butt. He looked at the woman in concern and began to wring his hands. "Trouble, Veronica," Richard said. "You." Well, trouble." The woman waved her hand. "I don't know who's looking for me." "He wants to detain you, Veronica," Richard said. "To detain you and bring you to the prosecutor. The life of a district prosecutor is good, especially in the summer days. If you want to go fishing, if you want to walk in the woods, and if not, you can hold a meeting." While all his co-workers were at each other's throats, Sam felt good in the middle of nowhere. What could possibly be so criminal about this? "Sarah?" said the prosecutor, pressing the secretary's call button. Yes, beautiful voice answered. "No one is allowed to see me after lunch," the official ordered. "All questions to the deputies. And I've got a lot of reports to work on." "Copy that, Sam," the secretary replied. "Unless you know who," the prosecutor added. "Well, let's hope it doesn't come to that. Of course, all sorts of things can happen in this neck of the woods. There are fights and stabbings and even murders. But these are, as they say, exceptions to the rules. People here live quietly, drink in moderation, honor and respect the law." That's why Sam felt so comfortable in his place. The worst crime among the common ones is stealing a piglet, or someone will steal a sewer manhole to scrap. The prosecutor's office was not poorly equipped with material and technical equipment. They gave a good service Toyota with increased cross-country ability. They repaired the offices. So now, peace and quiet, pleasure, not work. And also honor and respect from local residents. Moreover, even his prosecutor's salary could quite compete with the income of the capital's competitors. But there they have what expenses, what temptations. It's like here, in the middle of nowhere. He bought eggs from Glafira, 3 dozen for 100 rubles. Pork was supplied by Fomich. Both sirloin and minced meat cost pennies. Demayan was responsible for honey, Prokop for game. During the 10 years that he headed the district prosecutor's office, the role of each local resident became more and more specific. But no. She found an old woman who was bored in retirement and began to terrorize him with her letters and appeals. And it would be all right if she only wrote to him, once she got through to the very top. They sent him, Sam, a whole delegation. For 3 days he fed and fed them, took them fishing, and showed them beautiful places in the territory under his control. They smiled at him, shook his hand. They said that they had not had such a good vacation for a long time, so hearty and pleasant. And then, a week later, they sent him a scathing letter. They left the whole district without bonuses. He had already tried to deal with this old woman in different ways. Badly and good and praise and scare all to no avail. What an old woman, Sam shouted in his heart, reading another complaint. And it's all right, she wrote to me. She could have written to me again. The active grandmother demanded a personal appointment almost every week. Of course, Sam's age was not even comparable to that of a regular client. But sometimes he had the impression that this woman was literally drinking his vitality. But nothing. Now he knew exactly how to find a solution to this woman. There was only a little bit left to do. Christy remembered the conflict of 2 years ago and regretted that she had given up quickly. That summer, Veronica decided to baptize Max. In their village, there is no church. The nearest one is 50 kilometers away. And there was a pandemic raging in the yard, so they refused to baptize him under a plausible pretext. Then the obnoxious mother-in-law pretended to die, and her last wish was to put a cross on her grandson. Then she and her husband, borrowing a neighbor's minibus, hastily organized a ceremony. They gathered guests, set the table, prepared money for the church. Even the bishop lamented that worldly rules in the health sector must be observed. God will accept and forgive everything. Max was successfully baptized, and Veronica changed her mind about dying. But now she was talking about a spiritual career for her grandson. "You listen to what a voice he has, a ringing, singing," said mother-in-law. "This is what kind of bishop will turn out to hear." Or how once, at the dawn of married life, they decided to do a nice thing for Veronica and congratulate her on March 8. "We prepared a luxurious bouquet of flowers, as a gift a set of expensive dishes. Christy that day showed Maxam culinary talents and baked a huge cake. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, finally got to the house of my mother-in-law. All this is all well and good, of course, but," said Veronica then. "What's wrong?" Christy was surprised. "You should have congratulated from the very morning." "Cut off mother-in-law, and you only arrived in the evening. And I don't need to. I am an old and sick man who needs peace." Having said this, mother-in-law took the cake, flowers, and a huge box of dishes and hid in her house. No matter how much Tony knocked on the door, no matter how much he blushed, his mother never let him in. Christy and Tony then left without even drinking tea, and Veronica did not even apologize for her act. "Well, Richard," said Tony, the first to gather his thoughts. "Thanks, as they say, for dropping by. We'll take it from here." But the man wouldn't leave. He looked at the whole company strangely and slightly ingratiatingly, stepping over ridiculously. He looked at the beautiful kitchen set or at the ceiling, but he didn't leave. The mother-in-law hid her eyes, and Christy realized that she was hiding something again. Go on, Richard," Tony repeated. "You're a busy man, and we do not keep you. Or should I offer you some tea for the road? I'm sorry I'm so inhospitable." "It's not about tea," Richard said quickly and continued to stare at Veronica. "What is it?" Tony asked. "I'd like an advance," the man grunted. "For building materials. Your mom ordered a whole sheet of paper for me the other day. There's wallpaper and glue and panels and to them then are supposed to be corners and profiles. In short, 20 items. Give it to him." Veronica waved her hand nonchalantly. "Give him what?" the landlord asked, not even hiding his irritation. "It's the beginning of summer, Mother. All the money is over there, invested in the tractor and crops. Have you seen the barrels in the barn? That's the diesel I bought so I wouldn't run out of fuel at the height of the season. And there's no stash?" carelessly asked mother-in-law, ignoring the words of her son. "What are you talking about, Mom?" Tony hissed. He hated it when someone tried to make him look poor or stingy. Summer was in full swing. Everything was in circulation. What money, what stash? "I found it while I was renovating the place," said Veronica innocently. "What do you mean? A stash? A whole capital? I'd like to use it for some godly cause." It was Christy's turn to boil. Not only did this woman come into someone else's house and do her own thing, but she found their life savings, which she rushed to tell the first person she saw. Richard, watching this scene, wished he had pawned his own money for building materials. "It's not a stash," the landlady said loudly. "This is Max's money. He's going to grow up and we're already saving for his education. And if you, Veronica, can't keep secrets, then you should say so right away. I've never seen this man before in my life, by the way." "Well, I'm going to go, that's something," said Richard, but he was immediately grabbed by the shoulder and put on a chair. "Tony, don't go anywhere until it's done," he demanded. "Mom, how much money do these building materials cost?" "Yes, pennies it means," waved a mother-in-law. 92,000 rubles. 92, Christy exclaimed. 102, corrected Richard. That's with the discount. And I'm not counting the fuel. It's all drained anyway. Tony was silent. He looked mutely at his wife, and she easily deciphered the message. Pay up. He was a good man, but he was very dependent on other people's opinions. If someone in the village had the indiscretion to say that his pants did not fit, he immediately rushed to find new ones. Christy had a much firmer stance on life. So she looked at her husband and then said to Richard, "We don't have that kind of money. Neither I nor my husband ordered the building materials. If my dear mother-in-law wants to pay for God's sake, I will not lay down my bones here, but I won't give a penny myself. And neither will my husband. Go back to your village, and you can take Veronica too." Richard stared at his neighbor in bewilderment. He had hoped to earn a decent amount of money by his standards on this order, but it turns out that he only caused unnecessary problems. "Well, that, Veronica," said Richard. "No, that's fine. I'll cancel the order. It's not like slaughtering a pig. The wallpaper will go back to the warehouse just like the panels." "Nonsense. All right, see you later." As he said that, he saw that Tony was distracted, so he went out the door. He jumped into his car, started it on the 5th or 6th try, and drove off. There was a tense silence in the house after Richard's news. In the turmoil, they even forgot to ask him why the law enforcers wanted to see the woman so badly. "Mom, why is the prosecutor looking for you?" Tony asked. "Oh, son, there's an important case your mom had the indiscretion to start." The woman sorrowfully stretched out, and Christy got ready to listen to another fantastic story. To begin with, Max was removed from the house under a plausible pretext. Fortunately, he had his own occupation in the household, collecting chicken eggs. He was a boy nimble and dexterous, and therefore very neatly put them all in a basket. Besides, Max did not forget about personal hygiene, and he did not have to beg to wash his hands thoroughly afterwards. The adults sat down at the big table and began to discuss the situation. "I was in the wrong place at the wrong time," Veronica said dramatically, stretching her words. "Sometimes, my children, it happens that you can cross a rather large beast, and then expect trouble, wait for an ambush." "What does that mean?" Christy asked me rudely. "You don't need to quote me those Hour of Judgment shows of yours, An Hour There." "I once noticed the light on in Glafira's house late at night," my mother-in-law said. "It was strange because she herself had gone to her relatives, and only her little granddaughter was left at home. So—" "Little one?" Tony asked her again. "We went to school together, didn't we?" "Yes, I said she was small," nodded her mother-in-law. 25 years old, no more. I wondered who this child was having fun with. I went to the window. Well, did you? I snuck up without being seen. And I saw the prosecutor on her couch. Oh. Christy couldn't take it anymore. A prosecutor. He's already a handsome married man. Veronica was indignant. Well, let him. The landlady waved her hand. She didn't even know what the prosecutor looked like or what his name was. And she couldn't even imagine that the official had a family of his own. And ever since then, I've noticed the way he looks at me. Veronica finished in a whisper. He looks at me with hatred. There was silence at the table. Tony looked at his mother in disbelief. And Christy immediately thought that her mother-in-law was deceiving her. She had studied this duplicitous woman too well over the past years. Could it be that everything was different, and the prosecutor was not really in that ill-fated house, and Veronica was spreading rumors? Then it was easy to see what the man in the blue uniform didn't like. Here's the thing, Veronica, Christy said in her hostess rights. The prosecutor, of course, is a respectable man. But even he doesn't have the guts to persecute you because of such a situation to involve the district police. Why are you sitting there, Tony? Look at you. Suddenly shouted mother-in-law. What a wife you got. So, adultery is this situation. You should be shouting about it on every corner. Cheating is not a big deal. It's a matter of national importance. And you shouted? Christy asked, ignoring the hurtful words. Did I? The mother-in-law asked again. No, this is the first time I've told you. It's a private matter after all. Unless it concerns my family, of course. Do you have any other sins? The mistress said sternly. She was beginning to like her role. Now let Veronica ask for everything herself, and she would turn up her nose. What sins are there? The mother-in-law waved her hand. Well, let's say that she was stealing. Not by hundreds of litters, but just for herself, 40 or 50 litters. I was never caught by the hand. I dug up potatoes and carrots from my neighbor at night. Have you seen the sidewalk tiles around my house? They brought it to the local administration to finish it. So you took it out of there. Tony was surprised. 40 meters. Well, I'm on a wheelbarrow. Slowly, said Veronica. The statute of limitations has run out. It was 5 years ago. Then the mother-in-law continued to list her adventures, and her son's eyes rounded. He didn't know anything about his mother. He was most impressed by the story of the inscriptions on the stone house. They built a cottage at the end of the street, hooked up to communal gas. Someone hinted to them that it would be a good idea to reimburse some of the expenses to the villagers, but they refused. At night, an unknown person painted their expensive stone block fence and the wall of the house with obscene words. All the police were knocked down, but the culprit was never found. And he, it turns out, is sitting right here at the table. And it was she who taught me from childhood to be honest and right, thought Tony. And all this time she herself only did what little things she did to break the law. What a mummy. I won't live in the same house with a criminal, Christy said. We'll be partners in crime, and Max will be all alone. And you've already put me in the criminal, huh? Mother-in-law grabbed her heart. I'm not the one the district inspector is looking for. So you go out right now, demanded the mistress of Veronica, and I need to talk to my husband. What is this secrets? Indignant mother-in-law, there can be no secrets in my family. Get out, Mom, Tony said, and Veronica was officially outnumbered for the first time. Well, if you've been asked, you should respect it. After all, it wasn't Richard who asked, it was Christy, my wife. Her shoulders slumped and she walked away, wiping away her tears as she went. She would have liked to make another scandal, but she didn't feel strong enough after the exercise with the wallpaper. However, she did not tell the whole truth about her own exploits. But the old woman was sure that some of her most daring antics should not be told, and no one would ever know. What do you mean we don't know anything about your mom? Christy was indignant. It turns out so, agreed Tony. I didn't know what she does when no one sees her. But we can't hand her over to the prosecutor, can we? So now your mom's going to live here all the time, the landlady continued. She'll change whatever she wants while we're hiding her. Or she'll spend our stash, and we won't even know about it. Christy, my love, said Tony, hugging his wife. Be patient. Just a little bit. I'll hide the stash in the garage. No one will ever find. A little bit? How much? Asked the young woman. If the police are looking for her, it could be a long time. We have to find out exactly what she's done. Why, Tony waved his hand. It's my mom. What could she have done that's so bad? Let it be known to you that there was a loud knock at the gate. Obviously an outsider. They don't do that in the village. If you want a man, shout as if you wanted to wake up a dead man. And if it doesn't work, shout twice as loud. If they're knocking so hard, they must be aliens. Maybe they're looking for a second electric meter. Maybe they're looking for moonshine. But when Christy ran out into the yard and saw the guest behind the gate, it was immediately clear to her who they came for. Veronica, sitting on the bench of the bathhouse, swallowed her tears. That's how life had turned out. Now she would not be the one to restore order, but she would be called to order. You can't make a scandal. You can't make a scandal. You can't change the wallpaper. You can't add peas to the soup. It's not good. It's not good. When she heard the knock, she climbed on the bench and carefully looked out of the window. Behind the gate, literally 10 meters away from her, stood a policeman in uniform. Rural policeman is a separate kind of art. All the more or less diligent policemen quickly leave for the big cities. They build themselves apartments there, marry local women, so that their children forget what it is to live with roosters, dig potatoes, and fry lard in a frying pan. And only those who either couldn't or didn't want to remain in the villages. Archie belonged to the small third group. He just loved the village. Here he could drive a 4x4 Niva and give the impression of a tough ranger. He moved, however, according to all the rules of search science. He left his car at the edge of the village. Before approaching the gate, he walked around the perimeter of the plot. It looked like there were people in the house. But as Archie was the village policeman, he was a bit inattentive, and he didn't see the woman he was looking for. "Hello, mistress," said the young district inspector. "I apologize for the unannounced visit because we're looking for someone. And I was ordered to come to you unannounced." "Who are you looking for?" Christie was surprised. "I have only my husband and son at home, and the household, of course." "And we are looking for your mother-in-law, strangely enough," sighed the policeman, and then he looked intently at the pretty hostess. "How long have you seen her?" Two wolves began to fight inside Christie. One of them demanded that the hated Veronica be handed over to the police officer right now. And the other rightly pointed out that after such a step, family life could be cracked. Besides, there was no telling what she would say to the police and what they would do to her for it. No, there was no need to give up in a hurry. "Veronica?" Christie asked and yawned. "I see her often. Comrade Inspector, often. Even more often than I'd like." "Well, to be more specific," the policeman clarified. "Do you see her right now?" "Not right now," shrugged her shoulders. "Sorry, I don't have time to talk to you. I have a farm, chickens, pigs, husband." Christie turned and walked toward the house. But no sooner had she taken 5 steps than she heard a tactful cough behind her. She turned around. "I apologize," patiently called her district officer. "But I'll check it out. At the same time, we'll find out how your farmhouse complies with the state policy in the sphere of the fight against surrogate alcohol. You don't mind, do you? You won't hinder the servant of the state, will you?" The hostess smiled broadly. It would take a platoon of such good men to find where the devices for making moonshine were hidden. Tony didn't drink at all, and she herself could only have a drink on the occasion of a big celebration. "Come in," she waved her hand. "But my house is dirty and untidy." "We're used to it," Archie replied. He took off his cap and entered the house. He had seldom been in this village, for the people were very peaceful. But he had always wanted to visit this hut. Someone had told him it was all inside. There was a toilet, a bathroom, and even a boiler to wash your hands. He clucked his tongue, looking at such luxury. "There's no mother-in-law here," Christie shrugged. "I see," nodded the policeman. "I just like it a lot. You know, I have everything the old-fashioned way. A tub, a bath. But yours is beautiful. In summer, of course, it's a disadvantage. But in winter, when it's freezing outside." Christie felt herself getting sick. Raised by her parents, she preferred not to discuss such topics with strangers. And the policeman, it seemed, could give her a lecture about the closet. Fortunately, the policeman noticed the tension and stopped talking. "Hello, master," the policeman said when he saw Tony. "Hello, Archie," the man nodded. They'd met on a fishing trip together. "I'm looking for your mother," the policeman said. Tony asked, pretending he hadn't heard. "Your mother," I said, Archie repeated. "Fucking mother, huh? Have you seen where she is?" "Well, at home," replied the landlord. "Where else would she be?" "Strange," shrugged his shoulders. "And then they say she's gone, and she's nowhere to be found. And I have examined everything carefully, even the closet. Oh, they are going to repair it. That's good, that's right. Repair is a noble thing." Feeling sick to her stomach, Christie went outside. In the commotion, she had forgotten to feed the chickens and pigs. She had to go to the barn to get mixed fodder and dilute it in water. Her husband was with the policeman the whole time. They continued to discuss something passionately and moved outside. "What I don't do, it eats oil," the policeman said. "What?" and looked at the caps. Tony said in disbelief. "Both caps and bushings," nodded the policeman. "It's as simple as a building block." But suddenly he paused. He began to look from the owner of the house to the mistress, from master to mistress. Christy swallowed nervously. Had he noticed something? And what could they have missed? "You say you don't have Veronica." Archie stretched out. "What's this then?" His hand pointed triumphantly to the garage. Tony had already begun dissecting the ancient motorcycle to bring it back to life. But the old motorcycle was too conspicuous. All the surrounding villages must have known who was riding this museum piece. "This?" the owner of the house asked. "Well, it's a motorcycle. Why?" The policeman went inside without asking, lifted the saddle, where the creator of the rarity had provided a kind of glove compartment. He found a technical certificate with Veronica's name written on it, and some marks were made by her hand. "There," the policeman said triumphantly. "That's her iron horse. You think I won't recognize it? I don't. She gave me the bike," Tony said casually, yawning. "She's old. She can't handle it. And if you want it, I'll give it to you at a fair price. You'll give it to me." The policeman was excited. He had been looking at the motorcycle for a long time. Putting the folder on the workbench, the policeman began to examine the marvel of machinery. Many native parts had been replaced either by imported or homemade. He, however, could not be frightened by this. The policeman himself liked to tinker with machinery. "Ah, what a machine!" Smacking his lips, he said, "I'd like to go fishing on such a machine, or for mushrooms. Mama, breathtaking." After that, the policeman began to start the motorcycle. But no way. It required a whole ritual with unscrewing and wiping the plugs, sucking fuel. Both Christy and Tony literally froze, watching this activity. Suddenly, "Uncle, are you looking for my grandmother? And I know where the grandmother," heard all present in the garage thin voice. Max was completely forgotten, despite the behavior Tony in his mother's heart. So what if God gave her a bad temper? It wasn't easy for a woman raising 2 children alone. You wouldn't wish it on an enemy. Tony loved his wife too, but in a different way. He was just happy with her, and she gave him a son. But for his mother, love is blind, completely irrational. Therefore, when she came to detain the district police, he immediately realized, so just will not give. If he had to commit a crime for his mother's sake, he would, and everyone would understand him. When the overzealous policeman saw the motorcycle, Tony immediately realized that he had to offer it to the policeman. Even if it would run for 100 kilometers, it would give up anyway. And everything was going well until Max spoke up. He must have seen his grandmother hiding. He thought it was a game. That's when Tony decided a cop wouldn't leave home with his mom. So he slipped a power screwdriver with a long, sharp blade into his sleeve. "Max, you better go play with your toys." The head of the family grumbled unhappily, but the policeman immediately interrupted him. "You don't have to," Archie said. "Why didn't you tell me you had such a bright son?" "He's going to tell the policeman everything. Won't you, boy?" The policeman literally sat up. He slowly, with all solemnity, approached the child, looked into his clear eyes. He held out his hand, but Max did not understand this gesture of politeness at all. "Hello, boy," Archie said. "See, there's the policeman at work, like Uncle Anthony. You ever read Uncle Anthony?" "Nope." The kid shook his head. "Uncle, what's a policeman? I thought you were a policeman." "Like Robocarpoli." The police inspector laughed. He knew nothing about such a character, but he realized that modern children grow up in a completely different reality. The inspector took out of his pocket some badge he'd been given at a regular meeting and put it on the boy's shirt. The boy blossomed. "Thank you, Uncle," Max smiled. "You see, you have a badge now too," replied the policeman. "Well, tell me." Tony swallowed nervously. He looked at his son and made some facial movements with his eyebrows and mouth. The policeman couldn't see this because he was standing with his back to the owner of the house, and if he had known what he was clutching in his hand, he would have been wary. "Daddy, are you ill?" the boy asked fearfully, watching his father's face. No, son," Tony replied. "I'm fine. It's just that I'm wondering, how can you know where Grandma is?" "How could I?" The child was surprised. "I'm already 6 years old. Can I know such things?" Yes, interrupted the father of the district police officer. "Children sometimes know more than adults and share information more willingly. Come on, tell me where your grandmother is." "I object," Christy screamed at me. "This is a child and you have no right to question him." "I'm not questioning him," the policeman. He came up to me and said, "I'll tell you where Grandma is." "Right, kid?" "Right." The boy was happy. "So talk already," smiled the policeman. "Come on, son. We are listening attentively." There was complete silence in the garage. The policeman looked at the child, anticipating how he was about to give the woman away. That Veronica, all her life she complained about others, and now they've come for her. Tony carefully took out a power screwdriver and held it in his hand with a stop. He pulled it back so he could stab the precinct officer. Christy saw what her husband was about to do and averted her eyes. Only Max, because of his age, didn't see anything wrong. "And my grandmother is at home," the child said. "In her village. She left the motorcycle with my dad and went away. That's it." "Oh," said the policeman, and was about to swear, but he remembered that there was a child here. And he was a man in authority, almost like Uncle Anthony. He had to hold back. Tony exhaled and carefully placed the screwdriver on the workbench. His hands were trembling. "What a thing to do," thought the head of the household. Almost killed Archie, Christy stood with a silly smile. In her head, she had already escorted her husband to eternal settlement for assaulting a policeman. "Got around," thought the girl. "That's it, I'm leaving," Archie said. "You've been making a fool out of me for an hour." "Ah! And you've put the kid up to it." "We didn't put anyone up to it," Tony justified himself. "I told you right away that she's gone. And keep the bike." The policeman kept cursing. "You're offering me a piece of junk like that. Aren't you ashamed of yourself, sir?" Continuing his tirade, the policeman closed the gate, got into the Niva and drove away. There was a tense silence. Tony leaned on the workbench with both hands, thinking that he had almost taken the life of an innocent man. And because of whom? Because of his mother. When the noise of the service Niva quieted down, the door to the bathhouse ajar. First the mother-in-law poked her eye into the gap. Then she opened a little wider and stuck out her hand with a mirror. Like a commando, she scrutinized the yard. No one. Tony and Christy watched these strange movements in bewilderment. Finally, the door opened and the woman revealed herself in one piece. Ducking to the ground, she quickly ran into the garage, closed the door, and stroked Max's head. "Wow, you're a ninja, Grandma," the boy said admiringly. "What a clever grandson I have," laughed Veronica. "I'm the one who encouraged him to go out and say everything. You didn't think of that at all, did you? Stupid kids. They decided to hide Granny. If they're going to hide her, they have to think of everything, down to the smallest detail." As it turned out, she put the right words in her grandson's mouth, and she sent her grandson to meet the policeman herself. As she continued to extol her tactics and strategy, she had already gotten to the point where Christy herself wanted to hand her over to law enforcers. "Only my strategic mind allowed me to avoid," the mother-in-law said, pointing her finger at her daughter-in-law. "I'm sorry, sweetheart, but you have the brain of a chicken. The same chickens that you feed with grass. If we decided to hide it, we should have discussed everything, invented a secret language, and not only—" Christy gulped for air, offended. What does this woman do? Not only had she done something wrong, She's trying to turn the whole family against herself. And Max doesn't understand a thing. Mom, what are you doing? Tony was indignant. Why are you insulting Christy? Huh? I almost let Archie's guts out because of you. You would have been right, Veronica said, her lips tightening. Why did he want to detain me? The police officer who would be able to hold me accountable hadn't grown up yet. He has not grown up and will not grow up. Mother-in-law went into a frenzy and began to tell how the entire district offices danced to her tune. That the authority of a woman is unquestionable and it must be obeyed. It turned out that Veronica was almost a gray cardinal of all the surrounding villages. I'm going to bed, Christy said, and took Max's hand. Let's go to rest now, little one. I'll read you a bedtime story. And macaroni and eggs, demanded the son. Macaroni and eggs are very much wanted, Mom. Together they walked out the door. Tony thought about how lucky he was to have a wife. How does she keep her cool? You're so uncultured. The mother-in-law was indignant. Even to the end did not listen to how 10 years ago I solved the crime. Well, since she left you, son, listen. And listen carefully. If I die, who will tell you such interesting stories? Christy woke up in the hay and struggled to stretch her back. It was too damp to sleep in their bedroom, and the lack of wallpaper was unimpressive. Tony had gone to sleep in his own garage on the pretense that he had to get up early in the morning anyway. So, the weather is great today and it's time to pick cucumbers and tomatoes in the greenhouses. Max is still asleep, Christy said aloud. Then I can do the chores. I'll pick some, 5 boxes. I'll post pictures for people to see. And I need to price how much to sell. Taking plastic boxes, the young woman went to the vegetable garden. It was 6 o'clock in the morning. Max would be asleep for at least another hour. And with him, if he was lucky, the obnoxious mother-in-law. She'd been put in her son's room on purpose, so she'd be less likely to be discovered if someone came looking for her. But when Christy arrived at the greenhouses, she was outraged. There was no telling how many hours her mother-in-law had been there. During this time, the woman had managed to collect a huge amount of cucumbers and tomatoes. She had even taken a swing at the holy peppers, although the bushes had only just begun to bear small fruits. "What are you?" asked Christy in a voice shaking with excitement. "What are you doing here?" "Am I old and useless?" Veronica asked. "Here, I thought I'd help. Look, I've already harvested almost all the crops. Now we'll ask Vaska. He'll run to town, he'll get some jars and lids, and we'll start rolling them up with you." "Isn't that great?" "Are you out of your mind?" my daughter-in-law screamed. "It's not for us. It's for sale. And you have to take them off gradually, only ripe ones. And look what you've done. Who's going to buy it?" Most of the cucumbers, which threw directly on the ground, mother-in-law, were tiny, the size of a little finger or index finger. They need 2 or 3 more days to ripen. And tomatoes, she took them without picking them apart. Green ones, barely red. She plucked them right off the branches, some of them damaged. Christy knew from experience that many tomatoes were not ripe. "You don't have to sell anything," Veronica replied calmly. "Where is it seen that the crops from their own vegetable garden sold? What do you buy with that money?" "A tractor, toys, food," Christy answered her. "What have you done?" "We're not going to get any more customers. I've already booked this place for 2 weeks." "What have you done, Veronica?" The young woman looked around the greenhouse in confusion. No, it would be at least a week, if not 10 days, before the new cucumbers would be ready. She immediately rushed to the second greenhouse. Fortunately, the ubiquitous hands of the obnoxious mother-in-law had not had time to get here. But she was already standing at the entrance, kneading her fingers. "Go away," Christy demanded. "Get out before you regret it. This is our bread, don't you understand? My parents have been growing cucumbers and tomatoes all their lives. I learned how to plant seedlings before I could walk." "You didn't save your parents," Veronica said, coming inside. You burned them to death. I did, and now you want to kill me too, and my little boy with me. Of course he'll go away, you'll be relieved. Go away, don't disturb me. See what kind of working mood I'm in today, and then I'll make some rolls. Oh, and if you don't want to eat them, that's okay. I'll take them to my house, then I'll eat them all winter and treat my neighbors. Oh, so that's what it is, Christy guessed. This year, you were too lazy to plant your own seedlings, so aimed at ours. That's the last time I'm gonna tell you to go away. I'm not responsible for myself. Go away, go away, go away. And what will you do to me? Mocking mother-in-law said, stretching her lips. What will you complain to your husband? So you understand, on my side completely. And completely. And if you behave badly, I'll tell Max everything. Let him know what a naughty and insolent mother he has. When he's older, he won't respect you at all. I'll get a cell phone, calmly replied the daughter-in-law, and really took out a receiver from her pocket. I'll get the phone. I'll get the phone. Veronica mocked her. And what? Will you make a movie for this take? Attack of yours. Come on now. And I'll call the police together with the prosecutor, finished the hostess calmly. She was pleased to see the change in her mother-in-law's face. She turned pale, and then she turned red. For a while she just smacked her lips soundlessly. Then she took a step back, wiped the sweat from her forehead. She looked carefully at her daughter-in-law. Oh, it's hot here in the greenhouse, she said, and went outside. The woman began to wrap a towel around herself and then poured a bucket of cold water on her head. Christy followed her out, closed the surviving greenhouse, and returned to the one where her mother-in-law had already done her chores. She began to put more or less large cucumbers and juiced tomatoes into boxes. Of course it was a lot, but it would do. Now she'll text a fence on Viber and he'll come and get them. At least at what price? Because with helpers like that, we could go to hell. Christy waved her hand toward the rest of the pile. You can roll this stuff up. You can find jars and lids in my closet. Just be careful not to damage anything. If you make any repairs in my kitchen or anything else, I'll call the police. Right away, Veronica said, but really started picking cucumbers and tomatoes. After an hour or two, order was restored in the greenhouse. She tended to the damaged plants as best she could, put the harvested cucumbers and tomatoes into baskets, sprinkled them with water, and put them in the shade. John, the fence sitter, texted to say he'd be here tonight, and some of the regulars responded. No big deal. He'd sell everything and put the money away. Now we could have a bite to eat. Christy hadn't had a poppy seed in her mouth since morning. But when the young woman went into the kitchen and saw her mother-in-law pickling vegetables, everything inside her turned upside down. In the city, children grow up weak and helpless. Some, even at the age of 16, cannot even make a bed or cook themselves a meal. From the excess of free time are engaged in nonsense. Smoking vape, record useless videos, and then for a long time cannot find a place in life, suffer from depression and moping. In the village is different. Here, a child must grow up quickly because no one will spend a lot of time on him. And Christy had long ago gotten used to the fact that Max, even though he was only 6 years old, was already considered a full-fledged member of the family. She liked that light in his eyes when he watched his family, and whatever his parents were doing, he was there to help them. They plant potatoes. He is right there, counting out with his little foot the place in the furrow to throw the tubers. They make dumplings, and the boy has already washed his hands and puts minced meat on the dough. Shoveling snow, Max takes the smallest shovel and also shovels away the drifts. But what the mother-in-law came up with resembled a sophisticated form of torture. God only knew how the boy hadn't been burned yet. Slowly, almost breathlessly, Christy crept up to her child. That's it, hold another jar, Veronica commanded. It's not warm yet. She put 2 thick oven mitts on the boy and made him hold the jars over the gas burner where the water was boiling. The oven mitts were dry and could burst into flames at any moment. "Max," Christy whispered. "Put the jar carefully on the table." "What's that for, Mom?" The boy was surprised. "Put it down," the young woman demanded. Max shrugged his shoulders, took his hands off the kettle spout, and really put the hot jar. "Go play with the cars for now," Christy asked in as calm a voice as possible. As soon as the child came out, she grabbed her mother-in-law by the clothes, not remembering herself from rage. "What on earth are you doing?" she screamed. "Do you want to deprive your only grandson of his hands?" "Oh, stop it," Veronica waved her hand. "Stop it, I'm telling you." Her eyes darkened. At that moment, the woman became really scared. She suddenly thought that all her fears about her daughter-in-law were real. And this girl with rounded hips could really strangle her. But her grip suddenly became weak, and there was a strange sound. There was a loud knock on the wicket, and the mother-in-law immediately began to look for a place to hide. At once she rushed to the cellar, but she was afraid to climb down in case her daughter-in-law would push her down and cover it with a lid. Then she went back to the kitchen, where she was going to hide in the cupboard. But there were so many jars and drawers in it that cleaning them would take 20 minutes, no less. Finally, the mother-in-law rushed into the nursery and crawled under the bed. "Don't worry," Christy said after watching all that movement. "What's not to worry about?" replied the mother-in-law from somewhere inside. "It's not you. It's me the prosecutor is looking for. It's me who brought me wallpaper," the young woman carelessly replied and went to meet the guest. Yesterday she had shared her misfortune with Maria, a former townswoman who had fled to the countryside. She said she was doing some work right out of the hut, but Christy did not go into it much. But Maria had cheered her up by telling her that she had 5 tubes of her favorite soft pink wallpaper left. Tony was to bring the glue this afternoon. Veronica splashed her hands when she saw the wallpaper. "It's a disgusting color. Don't you dare put that in my bedroom." "It's not for you," Christy explained patiently. "It's for us." The landlady was happy that she had gotten such great wallpaper at a ridiculous price. Only 5 kilograms of cucumbers and 2 tomatoes. Maria was also pleased, saying she would be sure to promote their vegetables. Christy spent the rest of the day in the bedroom gluing wallpaper and painting the ceiling. She also taught Max how to do it. "First, you have to put some oil on the wall and then put a piece on," the young woman explained. "Who are you listening to?" Veronica said under her arm. "You have to put glue on it right away and properly. Come on, I'll teach you." "Veronica, go your own way," replied Christy, "or you know what will happen." Even though the room smelled of glue and was hot, she went to bed with her husband. She moved the beds properly and kept him awake until he made her happy. 3 times in a row. The prosecutor sat in the sauna and wondered where that grandmother could have disappeared to. That's how it is with any object. If it's not needed, it's always lying around. You step over it, it catches your eye. As soon as it's needed, it's gone. Maybe something happened to her. "Here he is," the secretary shouted from behind the door. "Invite him in," Sam said. A sauna at the DA's office is the first. It was good that his idea was approved upstairs. After all, a sauna is tradition, cleanliness, health. Of course, it was necessary to maintain the honor of the uniform, because in such a steam room could easily put a hidden camera. That's why here prosecutors were only and exclusively concerned with health. And if some beauty was to stroke a leg, there was another bathhouse for that, checked and firmly hidden from prying eyes. The door opened and his colleague, the local police chief, entered the sauna. He was in such a hurry that he had forgotten to take off his cap. "You were summoned, Comrade Prosecutor," the colleague said. "You were called. Sit down," Sam waved his hand nonchalantly. "Well, shall we refill it?" "Yes," slowly nodded the policeman. The prosecutor began to toss the water gently onto the stones. The sauna instantly turned into a Russian sauna. Sam took 2 brooms off the wall and began to hammer them at the policeman with gusto. "That's for red tape," thought the prosecutor. "This is for lack of due process. And this is for—" That's it. shouted the police chief and ran out of the steam room. The prosecutor beat himself a little more with a broom, just for decency, and got out too. There's kvass in the restroom. The police chief had tried his best. Fresh drink, recently brewed. It was the best after a bath. Together they came to their senses. Their skin turned pink, their thoughts became clearer. Well? The prosecutor asked. Did you find her for me? I have news, replied the chief of the Rovd and smiled. Only this, Sam. Can you tell me why you needed her? Patience, dear, said the prosecutor seriously. You realize in whose hands is the full procedural power. You'll find out everything. Just give me a deadline. Well then, listen, Sam, said the policeman and began to fantasize to justify his own slowness. Life at Christy and Tony's house gradually returned to a calm routine. The mother-in-law still continued her nonsense, but was now forced to act with an eye to her daughter-in-law's anger. Policemen never came again, but just in case, Veronica stopped leaving the house at daylight. Today, while Christy was working in the greenhouse and counting customers, Veronica cooked lean soup. Maybe she did it on purpose because her daughter-in-law hated that kind of soup. As soon as the young woman entered the house, she was almost knocked off her feet by the violent aroma of cabbage. She went into the kitchen and her mother-in-law was sitting there with Tony. That's a good idea, son, Veronica said, sipping on her soup. Hid me here safely. And you, my dear, know. Now every day you will eat lean soup. Why? First of all, it's very healthy. Do you know how they relieve gas? And if you hadn't eaten it, your gas wouldn't have gone anywhere. Second, it's cheap. 3, honey. Honey, son, where's your wife going? She just got in the house. But Tony was so used to turning off his mind while listening to his mother's musings that he didn't even hear her question. It was only when she repeated it several times that the meaning of her words began to sink in. Christy? He asked again. There was no telling where she might have gone. Maybe to feed the chickens, maybe to pick tomatoes. She's the boss, Mom? No, she's not, Veronica said indignantly. And if she wants to get up from the table, she has to ask permission, either from her husband or from the next in line. Me, that is. What an ill-mannered girl. Stop it, Mom, Tony said, and suddenly threw the spoon on the table. Stop it! I'm sick of it! What kind of mutiny is this on the family dinghy? Asked mother-in-law and stood up. That's how I raised you. Ungrateful brat who covers his own mother's mouth. Veronica drew in a lungful of air to vent her righteous anger, but suddenly she heard the knocking of the gate. The woman rushed to the window and was dumbfounded. Here, come in, Christy said, letting a whole delegation of law enforcers into her station. Come on in. She's been waiting for you for a long time already, even prepared holiday soup. Soup? The district attorney interjected. She is good, but with lard. Lenten. The hostess upset him. Well, it's no trouble. Hastened to reassure him the chief of the police department. I have my own laird. Everyone thought that he was ionizing his figure, but the policeman was not joking. He took out of his briefcase a salted lard in a transparent bag. The chief of the local fire brigade, who was trailing the procession, laughed as he observed his colleague's frugality. The whole procession was already moving towards the house. Hide me, son, hide me, Veronica said in horror. No, Mom, shook his head sadly Tony. This matter must be settled once and for all. After a hearty meal, Sam preferred either a nap or a game of billiards, depending on how hearty the meal was. Today his meal was almost dietary. A huge bowl of carcho soup, breaded chicken liver and onion patties. Now, the district prosecutor felt a keen desire to take a cue in his hands and stretch himself properly. For the last few days, the area of the motherland entrusted to him has been quiet and peaceful. It was good that this troublesome grandmother had been subdued a little, although it would seem, what kind of grandmother is there? She's no more than 60 years old. She's still got a lot to live for. But without her constant nagging, denunciations and appeals, things were calmer. Now the secretary would sweep the dust off the cloth, and it had already had time to soak it up during the forced downtime, and we could begin. Prosecutor had already called his deputy a Mickey's talented assistant, who was a terrible billiard player. In fact, the man was needed to consistently lose. Sam looked into the office just for a second and was immediately greeted by a phone call. "Damn it," said the prosecutor. "You should have called during office hours." The problem was that his authority didn't end anywhere. And even working hours for a prosecutor are conditional. So worried that someone high and powerful might be on the other end of the line, Sam picked up the phone. He heard a woman's voice and then smiled. Sometimes you have to answer the phone at lunchtime and get some kind of reward. Veronica seemed to be stuck to the chair. As if in a dream, she watched Christy arrange the chairs as the large guests took them. They looked around the house, clucked their tongues, and praised the interior. "Oh, how beautiful," said the prosecutor. "Everything seems simple but tasteful." "With what taste, Emma?" "And the toilet is right in the house, which is convenient," added the chief of the police department. "I just recently remodeled it. And before that, the stove is good, nice," praised the chief fire inspector. "It's right that they whitewashed it. Otherwise, if something happens..." There was a slight clamor for a while Christy put plates and neat flutes on the table. The young woman knew that such high guests would definitely want to drink a shot. So in order not to make a mess, she took out a bottle of good vodka from the freezer and poured it into a decanter. The walls immediately fogged up. Then she took out of the fridge a meat cut she had secretly made at 6 a.m. and covered it with a napkin. They drank one of each. Sam grunted contentedly, sniffed a piece of sausage, and went for the bag he'd brought with him. The mother-in-law was frozen to her chair and couldn't even move. The plate of lean soup that she had praised a few minutes ago was hopelessly cold. "Veronica, I asked the district attorney to bring you here," the prosecutor said, coughing, "to present you with a commendation and a valuable gift in a solemn atmosphere. But as it happens..." "That's right," nodded the chief of the police department and winked at his mother-in-law. "I sent the most experienced one." So she led him by the nose. She thought we wanted to detain her. Can you imagine? "Oh, Veronica, what an agent we have." "Well, what do I think? If she wants to be rewarded, she'll show up." And she did, didn't she? So you want to reward me?" Veronica whispered in a hushed voice. "Yes," said the prosecutor seriously. "You write a lot of appeals. You send us statements often, like the letter carrier. And here, can you imagine? One very aptly shot. We went to check the local enterprise, and there was just a dozen calves the engineer prepared for the theft." "What a cheeky bastard." "Is this the one where I complained that the cows had trampled all the grass?" Veronica asked. "And asked the state to put soft slippers on their feet?" "Exactly," nodded the chief of the police department. "Well, what can you do? Cows are animals that can trample us. But therefore we caught the criminal by surprise. And therefore we are grateful to you, dear." "Aha," added the chief fire inspector. "So he tied them together with what?" "Fire hoses. And we recently lost 5 of them. Anyway, I give you a standing ovation for your attentiveness." Veronica's blotchy. The distinguished guests finished their vodka, finished the slices, and the prosecutor even tasted the leeks. But apparently, such high cuisine was not for him. As soon as he tasted a spoonful, he immediately changed his face. "Well, it's time to do the honors," Sam said. "We still have work to do and the driver is waiting. Let's make a deal, Veronica. If anything happens, you call first. You don't have to make any appeals." "For you." The woman shone. "Of course I'll do it." "Not to me," the prosecutor cut her off. "To the assistant. Or a secretary." "Well, if they don't make it clear to you, then I will." "Well, mistress, thank you for your hospitality. The honor is ours." The door closed, and Tony exhaled. All those anxious minutes he had worried that the delegation would go to the garage and find that his tractor was not registered anywhere. But it wasn't. What a clever wife God had sent him. And vodka and slices now, the district prosecutor will definitely help him if something happens. Thank God, wailed Veronica, gathering her things. Thank God that I am no longer a prisoner of this house. Ungrateful. Only Max loves and respects me here. Only him. But the grandson sat frowning. He had only recently learned that his grandmother's cutlets also contained meat, as his father had carefully told him. But all his life Grandma Vera had convinced him otherwise. I'm leaving, she said. So be it. If I want to come and visit, I'll let you know.